The white satin of my wedding dress felt like chains around my body as I climbed the marble stairs of the Plaza Hotel, my hands trembling against the ornate banister. Each step echoed in the empty hallway, a hollow sound that matched the growing void in my chest. I had exactly 10 minutes before the ceremony began. 10 minutes to retrieve my mother's pearl necklace from the bridal suite and return to marry the man I thought I loved. The sound of Daniel's voice stopped me cold outside the suite door. But it wasn't the warm, gentle tone he used with me. This voice was sharp, calculating, filled with a venom I'd never heard before. My hand froze on the door handle as another voice joined his. Sarah's voice, my maid of honor, my best friend since childhood. "She suspects nothing?" Sarah asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Nothing at all," Daniel replied, and I heard the clink of glasses. Ava's always been too trusting, too naive. It's what made her perfect for this. My blood turned to ice water. I pressed myself against the wall, my elaborate dress crushing against the wallpaper as I strained to hear more. "And the inheritance?" Sarah's voice was hungry now. 2.7 million, just like her parents told me. The moment we're married, I gain access to the trust. She'll sign the papers tomorrow during our honeymoon planning. Daniel's laugh was cold, mechanical. "She thinks we're going to Tuscany. Instead, I'll be making arrangements for her unfortunate accident." "Poison?" Sarah asked casually, as if they were discussing dinner plans. "Ricin, untraceable, looks like a heart attack. She'll be dead within 48 hours of consumption, and I'll be the grieving widower inheriting everything." The sound of Daniel moving around the room made me press closer to the wall. The beautiful thing is, she'll never see it coming. Even now, she's probably downstairs practicing her vows, convinced she's marrying her soulmate. "And then we can finally be together," Sarah said, her voice sultry. "I've been waiting so long to have you all to myself." The sound of them kissing made bile rise in my throat. 3 years. 3 years of my life wasted on a man who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with legs. 3 years of believing in fairy tales while he planned my murder. I backed away from the door on shaking legs, my mind reeling. The necklace no longer mattered. Nothing mattered except getting away from this place, from these people who wanted me dead. I gathered my skirts and ran toward the service elevator, my heart hammering against my ribs. The storm outside Manhattan hit me like a physical blow as I burst through the hotel's side exit. Rain immediately soaked through my wedding dress, the delicate fabric clinging to my skin as I stumbled down the sidewalk. I had no purse, no phone, no coat, just the dress on my back and the horrifying knowledge that the man waiting for me at the altar planned to kill me for money. Lightning cracked across the sky as I ran blindly through the streets, my satin shoes slipping on the wet pavement. Other pedestrians stared at the wild-eyed bride stumbling through the storm, but I couldn't stop. I had to get somewhere safe, somewhere I could think. The black Mercedes came out of nowhere. I saw the headlights, heard the screech of brakes, felt the impact as the car's bumper caught my hip and sent me sprawling across the hood. Pain exploded through my body as I hit the pavement, my dress tearing on the asphalt. Through the rain and shock, I heard a car door slam and the sound of expensive shoes running toward me. Jesus Christ. The voice was deep, rough with concern and something darker. "Are you hurt?" I looked up through the rain streaming down my face and found myself staring into the most intense dark eyes I'd ever seen. The man crouching beside me was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than my rent. His dark hair was slicked back despite the rain, and there was something dangerous in the way he moved, like a predator checking his prey. "I'm fine," I lied, trying to sit up. Pain shot through my ribs and I gasped. "No, you're not." His hands were gentle but firm as he examined me, checking for injuries with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. "What's your name?" "Ava," I whispered, suddenly aware of how I must look. a soaking, wet bride covered in street grime, shivering in the arms of a stranger. Ava. He said my name like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. I'm Alexander Romano, and you're coming with me. It wasn't a request. Before I could protest, he scooped me up in his arms like I weighed nothing, carrying me toward his car. The interior was warm and luxurious, leather seats that probably cost more than my entire wedding. As he settled me in the passenger seat, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. My carefully styled hair was plastered to my head, my makeup ruined by rain and tears. I looked like a disaster. "Where were you running to?" he asked as he started the engine, cranking up the heat. "Nowhere." The truth spilled out before I could stop it. I was running from somewhere. From someone. Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Your husband?" "Almost husband." I hugged myself, trying to stop the shivering that had nothing to do with the cold. I found out he was planning to kill me. For money. I expected disbelief, questions, demands for proof. Instead, Alexander simply nodded as if brides confessing murder plots was an everyday occurrence for him. Daniel Cole? My blood froze. "How do you know that name?" "I know a lot of things, Ava." He pulled the car into traffic with smooth precision, including the fact that Daniel Cole owes my family a substantial amount of money. Money he was planning to pay back with your inheritance. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. "You're Alexander Romano. And yes, I'm exactly who you think I am." His dark eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I stared at him, this dangerous stranger who'd literally swept me off my feet. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the car, I felt oddly safe for the first time in hours. "I don't know." "I do." Alexander's voice was quiet, but filled with steel. Daniel Cole made the mistake of playing games with people who don't forgive debts. And now he's made an even bigger mistake. "What mistake?" Alexander's smile was cold and sharp as a blade. "He hurt something that belongs to me now." The possessive way he said it should have terrified me. Instead, something warm and dangerous unfurled in my chest. "I don't belong to anyone." "We'll see about that." He pulled the car into an underground garage beneath a building that looked more like a fortress than a home. "Welcome to your new life, Ava Reynolds. One where Daniel Cole can't touch you." As the garage door closed behind us, sealing us into darkness, I realized I'd just traded one dangerous situation for another. But as Alexander came around to help me out of the car, his touch gentle despite the power I could feel coiled beneath his surface, I couldn't bring myself to care. Daniel had wanted to kill me for money. Alexander Romano looked at me like I was something worth protecting. In the space of an hour, my entire world had crumbled and rebuilt itself around this dark, dangerous man who'd literally saved my life. The question was whether he'd be my salvation or my destruction. The mansion Alexander brought me to was a fortress disguised as luxury. Wrought iron gates closed behind us with an ominous clang, and I counted at least 4 men stationed around the perimeter as we drove up the circular driveway. Each one carried himself with the unmistakable posture of armed security, their eyes tracking our movement with professional precision. "How many people work for you?" I asked, as Alexander helped me from the car, his hand steady on my elbow as I wobbled on my ruined heels. "Enough." His answer was deliberately vague, but I caught the way his eyes swept the grounds, cataloging every shadow, every movement. Even here, in what was clearly his stronghold, he remained alert. The interior of the house was breathtaking in its opulence. Marble floors stretched endlessly, covered by Persian rugs that probably cost more than most people's cars. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over oil paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. Everything spoke of old money, careful taste, and absolute power. "Mrs. Chen will take care of you," Alexander said, gesturing to an elegant Asian woman who appeared as if summoned. She was perhaps 50, dressed in a simple black dress that managed to look both professional and expensive. Her dark eyes assessed me with the same clinical efficiency I'd seen in Alexander's gaze. "Miss Reynolds." Mrs. Chen's voice carried a slight accent and absolute authority. "You'll need dry clothes and medical attention. Please follow me." I looked back at Alexander, suddenly reluctant to leave his side. In the space of an hour, he'd become my anchor in a world that had turned completely upside down. "Where will you be?" "Making phone calls." His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Daniel Cole needs to understand that his plans have changed." The chill in his voice made me shiver, but not from fear. From something darker, more primitive. The knowledge that this dangerous man was willing to unleash his power on my behalf. Mrs. Chen led me up a grand staircase, past more artwork and antiques that spoke of generations of wealth and influence. "This wing is private," she explained as we walked down a hallway lined with closed doors. "Mr. Romano's personal quarters are at the end. Your room is here." She opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was larger than my entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in deep blue silk that matched the curtains. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking manicured gardens, though I could see the subtle glint of security cameras hidden among the landscaping. "Beautiful," I breathed, then caught myself. "I mean, thank you. But I should probably find a hotel or—" "That won't be possible," Mrs. Chen interrupted gently. "Mr. Romano has made arrangements for your safety. This includes remaining here where you can be properly protected." The words were polite, but the underlying message was clear. I wasn't a guest. I was a prisoner, albeit one housed in luxury. Mrs. Chen opened an enormous walk-in closet, revealing clothes in my exact size. Casual wear, evening gowns, everything from jeans to cocktail dresses, all bearing the subtle signatures of expensive designers. "How did you—" "Mr. Romano is very thorough," she said simply. "He had these delivered while we were traveling here." I stared at the clothes, my mind reeling. He had an entire wardrobe delivered in less than 2 hours. Mr. Romano's resources are considerable. Mrs. Chen selected a simple cashmere sweater and designer jeans, laying them on the bed with matching undergarments. When he decides something needs to happen, it happens quickly. The implications sent a chill down my spine. What kind of man could mobilize this level of efficiency on such short notice? And what did it mean that he'd decided I needed to be here, protected by his considerable resources? "I'll run you a bath, Mrs. Chen continued, moving toward an ensuite bathroom that was larger than most people's bedrooms. "You should soak those bruises before they set in." As she busied herself with preparing the bath, I moved to the French doors and tested the handle. Locked. The balcony was on the 3rd floor, overlooking a sheer drop to the gardens below. Even if I could get outside, the grounds were crawling with security. "The doors are for your protection," Mrs. Chen said quietly, having noticed my investigation. "Mr. Romano's enemies are numerous and creative. Until he's dealt with the immediate threat, these precautions are necessary." "Immediate threat." I turned to face her. "You mean Daniel?" Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her dark eyes. "Among others." Before I could ask what she meant, she disappeared into the bathroom. I heard water running, the clink of crystal bottles. When she emerged, the air was fragrant with lavender and something more exotic. "Take your time," she said. "I'll have dinner sent up later. Mr. Romano expects to join you around 8. Alone at last, I sank onto the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, I'd woken up believing I was about to marry the love of my life. Now I was essentially captive in a mobster's mansion, wearing designer clothes that had been procured in the time it took us to drive here. The bath was exactly what I needed. The hot water eased the ache from where I'd hit the pavement, and the expensive bath oils made my skin feel like silk. But even as I soaked, my mind raced with questions. How long had Alexander known about Daniel's debt? How long had he been watching me? And most importantly, what did he really want from me? I was drying my hair when I heard voices in the hallway. Alexander's deep voice, speaking in rapid Italian to someone whose responses were too quiet to make out. Then footsteps, moving away from my door. When I emerged from the bathroom, I found a tray had been left on the small table by the window. Not room service from a hotel, but an elegant dinner for one. Filet mignon, roasted vegetables, a small salad, and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing, my attention focused on the sounds of the house around me. Footsteps in the hallway, muffled conversations, the occasional sound of cars coming and going. This wasn't just a home. It was a command center, a hub of activity that never truly slept. At exactly 8 o'clock, there was a soft knock at my door. "Come in," I called, setting down my wineglass and smoothing the cashmere sweater Mrs. Chen had selected. Alexander entered, and I felt the air in the room shift. He'd changed from his suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered, and he carried with him that same subtle cologne I'd noticed in the car. Sandalwood and spice, masculine and expensive. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his dark eyes sweeping over me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "Confused," I answered honestly. "Overwhelmed, grateful." I gestured around the room. "This is all very generous, but I have questions." "I'm sure you do." He moved to the French doors, checking the locks with automatic efficiency before turning back to me. "Ask them." "How long have you known about Daniel's plan?" 3 weeks. Alexander's answer was matter-of-fact, delivered without a hint of apology. He approached my organization for a loan to cover some gambling debts. When we investigated his ability to repay, your inheritance came to light. The casual way he said it made my stomach drop. "You've been watching me for 3 weeks?" "Watching over you," he corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I stood, needing to move, to pace, to do something with the nervous energy coursing through me. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I've been under surveillance by a criminal organization, without my knowledge or consent. Alexander's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Would you prefer I'd let Daniel's plan proceed uninterrupted?" The question hit like a physical blow. "That's not what I mean, and you know it." "What I know," Alexander said quietly, "is that Daniel Cole was planning to murder you for money he owed to people who don't accept late payments. What I know is that without my intervention, you'd be dead within 48 hours of your wedding night." He moved closer, and I felt the heat radiating from his body, caught the subtle tension in his movements. "What I know is that you're alive because I decided you were worth protecting. Worth protecting or worth something else." The words came out sharper than I intended. Alexander smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Careful, Ava. You're asking questions you might not like the answers to." "Try me." He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he moved to the window, looking out over the grounds with the casual confidence of a man surveying his kingdom. "Daniel owes my family $400,000, he said finally. "Money he borrowed to cover losses at underground poker games. The terms were clear. Repayment in full within 60 days, or we'd collect through other means." "Other means? Use your imagination." Alexander's reflection in the glass was cold and sharp. "When the deadline passed and Daniel came to us with a proposal to repay using your inheritance, we agreed to an extension." We were curious to see how far he'd go. You were curious. I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. You let him plan my murder because you were curious. We let him think he was planning your murder, Alexander corrected. There was never any real danger to you. My people have been watching every move he's made. Your people? I sank back onto the bed, overwhelmed. How many people are involved in this? Enough to ensure your safety. Alexander turned from the window, fixing me with that intense stare. The question now is what happens next. What do you mean? Daniel still owes money. Your inheritance is still the only way he can pay it. And you're still the only thing standing between him and $400,000. Alexander moved closer, his presence filling the room. He won't give up easily. The implication sent ice through my veins. You're saying he'll try again. I'm saying he'll try everything. Legal challenges to the inheritance, claims that you're mentally unstable, possible kidnapping attempts. Alexander's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. Men like Daniel don't accept defeat gracefully. So, what am I supposed to do? Hide here forever? Alexander smiled, and this time there was something genuinely warm in it, something that made my pulse quicken for entirely different reasons. Not forever, he said, just until I eliminate the problem permanently. The casual way he said eliminate made my blood run cold. What does that mean exactly? It means you don't need to worry about Daniel Cole anymore. Alexander moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. Get some rest, Ava. Tomorrow we'll discuss the terms of your protection in more detail. Terms? The word came out sharper than I intended. Alexander's smile was predatory. Nothing in my world is free, beautiful, not even salvation. After he left, I sat in the sudden silence, my mind reeling with implications. I was protected, yes, but protection from a man like Alexander Romano came with a price. The question was whether I was prepared to pay it. Outside my locked French doors, the lights of Manhattan glittered like stars, close enough to see, but impossibly far away. I was safe from Daniel's murderous plans, but I was beginning to realize I might have traded one kind of captivity for another. The difference was that Alexander's cage was lined with silk and gold, and despite everything, the surveillance, the imprisonment, the casual references to elimination, I found myself wondering what it would be like to stop fighting it, to let myself belong to someone powerful enough to keep me safe. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my belly, a dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with the expensive wine and everything to do with the way Alexander looked at me, like I was something precious, something worth protecting, something worth keeping. I moved to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably discovering that his bride had vanished, that his carefully laid plans had crumbled. Somewhere out there, my old life was ending. But here, in this beautiful prison, something new was beginning. Something dangerous and intoxicating and completely beyond my control. I had a feeling that by tomorrow, I'd understand exactly what Alexander's protection would cost me. And I wasn't sure I'd have the strength to refuse to pay it. I woke to the sound of voices arguing in the hallway outside my room. Alexander's deep tones, controlled but edged with steel, and another man's voice I didn't recognize. Their conversation was in rapid Italian, but the tension was unmistakable. Sunlight streamed through the French doors, and I realized I'd slept later than usual. The clock on the nightstand read 9:30. At home, I would have been at work for hours already, serving coffee to Wall Street executives who barely acknowledged my existence. The thought of my old life felt surreal now, like remembering a dream. Had it really been less than 24 hours since I'd discovered Daniel's plan? Since I'd fled into the storm and collided with Alexander Romano? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Miss Reynolds? Mrs. Chen's voice was respectful but firm. "Mr. Romano requests your presence for breakfast." I found clothes laid out on the chair where I'd left them the night before. Dark jeans, a cream silk blouse, and a cashmere cardigan in deep navy. All in my exact size, all bearing the subtle signatures of designers whose names I recognized from magazine spreads. The breakfast room was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate than the grand dining room I'd glimpsed the night before. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, where I could see two men in dark suits making periodic rounds. The morning light revealed what the darkness had hidden. This estate was a fortress, beautiful but impenetrable. Alexander was already seated at the head of a polished wooden table, a tablet and several phones arranged beside his plate. He looked up as I entered, those dark eyes assessing me with the same intensity I was beginning to recognize as his default setting. "Good morning," he said, rising to pull out my chair. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, at odds with everything I knew about what he was. "Good morning." I settled into the chair, hyper-aware of his proximity as he pushed it in. "Thank you for the clothes. Though I have to ask how you managed to get my size so perfectly." "I'm observant." Alexander returned to his seat, pouring coffee from an elegant silver service. "And I have excellent resources." The coffee was perfect, rich and smooth with just a hint of cream. I sipped it while studying Alexander over the rim of my cup. In the morning light, he looked younger than I'd initially thought. Early 30s, perhaps, with the kind of refined features that spoke of good genetics and careful grooming. But there was something ageless about his eyes, a depth that suggested he'd seen more than most men twice his age. "You had visitors early this morning," I observed, thinking of the argument I'd overheard. "News travels fast in my business." Alexander's smile was grim. "Daniel has been making calls, trying to locate you. He's also retained a lawyer and filed a missing persons report." My hand stilled on my coffee cup. "A missing persons report?" "Claiming you suffered a nervous breakdown and disappeared from your own wedding." Alexander's voice was carefully neutral. He's painting himself as the concerned fiancé, worried about your mental state. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Even now, even after his plans had been exposed, Daniel was still trying to manipulate the narrative. Can he do that? Legally? He can try. Alexander leaned back in his chair, studying me. "The question is whether you're prepared to fight back." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering directly, Alexander picked up one of his phones and scrolled through something. "Tell me about your inheritance, Ava." The details Daniel was so interested in. I shifted uncomfortably. "Why does that matter?" "Because knowledge is power. And right now, you need all the power you can get." Alexander set down his phone, fixing me with that intense stare. "Daniel isn't going to simply disappear. He's invested too much in this plan to walk away quietly." The truth of it settled over me like a cold weight. I'd been so focused on escaping Daniel's immediate threat that I hadn't considered the larger implications. "The trust fund was established by my grandparents," I said finally. $2.7 million, accessible when I marry or turn 30. "And you're how old now?" 26. Alexander nodded as if confirming something he already knew. So marriage was Daniel's quickest path to the money. Apparently. The bitterness in my voice surprised me. I thought he loved me. 3 years of thinking I'd found my soulmate, and it was all about money. Love is a luxury men like Daniel can't afford. Alexander said quietly. Everything is transactional for them. Everything has a price. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. "And what about men like you?" Alexander's smile was sharp and dangerous. "We're honest about what we want." "And what do you want, Alexander?" He leaned forward, and I caught that subtle scent again. Sandalwood and spice, expensive and intoxicating. Right now, I want to keep you alive. Everything else is negotiable. Negotiable. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care. That sounds like you're planning to ask for something in return. I am. The simple honesty of it was almost refreshing after years of Daniel's calculated lies. What? Alexander stood, moving to the windows that overlooked his carefully manicured kingdom. Daniel's debt doesn't disappear just because his plan failed. The money is still owed, and my family doesn't accept partial payments. I don't understand what that has to do with me. Don't you? Alexander turned back to me, and something in his expression made my pulse quicken. You're the heir to the very money he owes us. You could pay his debt yourself. The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. You want me to pay Daniel's gambling debts? I want you to buy your freedom. Alexander moved closer, his presence filling the space between us. $400,000, transferred to my family's accounts. In exchange, Daniel's debt is forgiven, and you receive the full protection of the Romano organization. Protection I apparently need because of your organization in the first place. Alexander's laugh was low and rough. You needed protection the moment you inherited that money, Ava. Men like Daniel exist everywhere, and they're all looking for easy targets. At least this way, you know exactly what you're getting. I stared at him, my mind reeling with the audacity of it. You're asking me to pay you $400,000 for protection from a problem you helped create. I'm offering you a solution that ensures your safety permanently. Alexander sat back down, his dark eyes never leaving mine. With my family's protection, no one will ever again see you as an easy target. No one will ever again try to manipulate or harm you for your money. And what happens if I refuse? Alexander's smile was cold. Then Daniel remains in debt to dangerous people, which makes him desperate. Desperate men do unpredictable things, stupid things, things that put innocent people at risk. The threat was delivered so casually, so matter-of-factly, that it took a moment for the implications to sink in. You're threatening me. I'm explaining reality. Alexander leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. Daniel Cole is already calling in favors, hiring private investigators, reaching out to anyone who might help him locate you. He's not going to stop, Ava. Not until he has access to that money, or he's dead. So kill him. The words came out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted the cold calculation in my voice. Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. Is that what you want? Was it? The question lodged in my throat like a stone. 24 hours ago, I would have been horrified at the thought of wanting someone dead. But 24 hours ago, I hadn't known that the man I loved was planning to murder me for money. I want him to leave me alone, I said finally. That can be arranged, for a price. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything has a price with you, doesn't it? Everything has a price everywhere, beautiful. I'm just honest about it. Alexander reached across the table, his fingers brushing against mine. The contact sent an unexpected jolt of electricity up my arm. The difference is that I'm offering you something real in return. Safety, security, a life where you never have to look over your shoulder again. A life under your control. A life under my protection. His thumb traced across my knuckles, the gesture somehow both gentle and possessive. There's a difference. Is there? I didn't pull my hand away, despite every instinct telling me I should. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're asking me to trade one cage for another. Alexander's grip tightened almost imperceptibly. My cage comes with better amenities. The casual arrogance of it should have infuriated me. Instead, I found myself studying his face, looking for some hint of the man beneath the dangerous exterior. "Tell me about the night we met. How did you know to be on that street at that exact moment?" Something flickered in Alexander's eyes. "I told you. My people were watching Daniel." "That's not what I'm asking." I turned my hand palm up, so our fingers were intertwined. "I'm asking if you knew I was going to run. If you were waiting for me." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "I knew Daniel was escalating. I knew the wedding was his deadline. My people were positioned around the hotel in case intervention became necessary. But you didn't expect me to discover his plan on my own." "No." Alexander's smile was genuine this time, tinged with something that might have been admiration. "That was you being smarter than anyone gave you credit for, including me." The admission sent warmth spreading through my chest. When was the last time someone had called me smart? When was the last time anyone had looked at me like I was more than just a pretty face attached to a bank account? "So what happens now?" I asked. "If I agree to your terms, what does protection from the Romano family actually look like?" "It looks like this." Alexander gestured around the elegant breakfast room. "You live here, under my direct protection. You have access to everything you need or want. You're safe from any threat, including ones you haven't thought of yet. And in exchange, you belong to me." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. "Belong to you. In every way that matters." Alexander's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath the silk. "You live where I say. You go where I say. You see who I approve. In exchange, nothing and no one will ever hurt you again." I should have been terrified. Should have stood up and demanded he take me to the police, to the FBI, to anyone who could help me escape this beautiful prison. Instead, I found myself considering his offer with a clinical detachment that surprised me. What did I have to go back to? A job that barely paid my rent? An apartment in a neighborhood where I walked quickly after dark? A life where I was invisible to everyone except men who wanted to use me? "What about my music?" I asked finally. Alexander tilted his head. "Your music? I'm a pianist. I went to Juilliard before." I gestured vaguely. "Before life got in the way. I play at small venues sometimes when I can get the gigs. You could have a piano here, the best one money can buy. You could play whenever you wanted. For an audience of one?" Alexander's smile was predatory. "I appreciate beautiful things, Ava. Beautiful music, beautiful art, beautiful women. I take very good care of the things I value." The way he said it sent heat pooling low in my belly, a dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee and everything to do with the way he was looking at me, like I was something precious and rare and worth protecting. "And if I say no?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew the answer. "Then you're free to leave." Alexander released my hand, sitting back in his chair. "But you leave without my protection, without any guarantee that Daniel won't find another way to get what he wants, without any assurance that the next man who discovers your inheritance won't have the same ideas Daniel did. You make it sound like I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, Ava. The question is whether you're brave enough to make the smart one." I looked out the windows at the perfectly manicured grounds, the discreet security presence, the walls that kept the world at bay. It was beautiful here, safe, quiet, everything my old life hadn't been. And Alexander looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth protecting, worth keeping, worth cherishing. When was the last time anyone had looked at me that way? "I need time to think," I said finally. Alexander nodded as if he'd expected nothing less. "Take all the time you need." But understand that every day you wait is another day Daniel is out there, planning his next move. He stood, straightening his jacket with elegant precision. Mrs. Chen will show you around the estate today. Get familiar with your new home, Ava. I have a feeling you're going to be here for a long time. After he left, I sat alone in the sun-drenched breakfast room, staring out at the gardens where armed men walked discreet patrols. I should have been planning my escape, figuring out how to contact the authorities, finding a way back to my old life. Instead, I found myself imagining what it would be like to wake up here every morning, to have someone as powerful and dangerous as Alexander Romano looking at me like I was something precious, to never again have to worry about money, about safety, about men like Daniel who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like the first real choice I'd had in years. Mrs. Chen found me in the music room 3 hours later, my fingers dancing across the keys of a Steinway grand piano that probably cost more than most people's houses. The melody I was playing was something I'd composed years ago, back when I still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. "Beautiful," she said softly, settling into one of the leather chairs positioned to listen. "Mr. Romano chose well when he had this room prepared." I paused mid-phrase. "He had this room prepared? When?" "Yesterday evening, while you were resting." Mrs. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "He made several calls to ensure the piano would be tuned and ready for you this morning." The implication sent a chill down my spine. "He was that certain I'd stay? Mr. Romano is rarely wrong about people." She gestured toward the piano. "He said you attended Juilliard. That's quite an accomplishment." I resumed playing, using the familiar motions to steady my racing thoughts. "I dropped out junior year. Couldn't afford to continue after my parents cut me off." "They disapproved of your career choice?" "They disapproved of everything about me." The words came out more bitter than I'd intended. Wrong major, wrong boyfriend, wrong priorities. They wanted me to marry someone from their social circle and become a proper society wife. Instead, you chose independence. Instead, I chose poverty. I finished the piece with a flourish that contained more anger than artistry. 3 years of serving coffee to people who wouldn't even look at me. 3 years of struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment with paper-thin walls. Independence is overrated when you can't afford to eat. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, and I could feel her studying me with the same clinical assessment I'd seen in Alexander's eyes. "Is that why you accepted Daniel's proposal? For financial security?" The question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. I thought I loved him. But the security didn't hurt. I stopped playing entirely, my hands falling to my lap. "Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you human." Mrs. Chen rose from her chair, moving to stand beside the piano. "My first husband married me for my father's connections in Hong Kong. I married him to escape an arranged marriage to a man 3 times my age. We both got what we needed, and we were happy enough. What happened to him?" "He died young. Heart attack at 38. Her voice was matter of fact, but I caught the shadow that crossed her features. "I was left with money but no protection. In my world, that's a dangerous combination for a woman." "So you came to work for Alexander?" "I came to work for his father, originally. Alessandro Romano Sr. was a man who understood the value of loyalty." Mrs. Chen's smile was soft with memory. "When he died and Alexander took over, I stayed. This family has given me security, purpose, respect, things I never had before. I understood what she was telling me, the careful way she was laying out the parallels between her story and mine, and now Alexander is offering me the same thing." "Mr. Romano is offering you a choice," Mrs. Chen corrected. "The question is whether you're wise enough to take it." Before I could respond, the sound of voices in the hallway drew our attention. Alexander's voice, sharp with anger, and another man speaking rapid Italian. The conversation was heated, urgent, and moving closer to the music room. "What are they saying?" I asked. Mrs. Chen's expression tightened. "There's been a development with Daniel." The door opened, and Alexander entered, his face set in lines of cold fury. Behind him followed a man I hadn't seen before, shorter than Alexander but powerfully built, with graying hair and intelligent eyes that immediately assessed both Mrs. Chen and me. "Ava," Alexander said, his voice controlled but edged with steel. "This is my uncle, Marco Romano. He has some information you need to hear." Marco nodded to me with old-world courtesy before launching into rapid Italian. I caught a few words: polizia, avvocato, problema. But the rest was lost. Alexander's expression grew darker with each word. "English, Marco," Alexander said finally. "She needs to understand what we're dealing with." Marco switched languages smoothly, his accent slight but noticeable. "Miss Reynolds, your former fiancé has been busy since yesterday. He's not only filed a missing persons report, but he's also petitioned a judge for emergency conservatorship of your inheritance." My blood turned to ice. "What does that mean?" "It means," Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet, "that Daniel is claiming you're mentally incompetent and need a guardian to manage your finances. He's asking the court to appoint him as your conservator, which would give him legal access to your trust fund." "Can he do that?" Marco's expression was grim. "He's provided evidence of erratic behavior, claims you've been suffering from depression and anxiety. He has witness statements from Sarah Whitmore and several other friends saying you've been acting strangely for months. Sarah, my maid of honor, the woman I'd trusted with my deepest secrets, was now helping Daniel steal my life." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. "What kind of evidence?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Photos of you looking distressed at public events. Medical records showing you've been prescribed anti-anxiety medication. Testimony that you've been increasingly isolated and paranoid." Marco's list was delivered with clinical precision. Separately, none of it means much. Together, it paints a picture of someone in crisis. But it's all lies. "Truth is irrelevant," Alexander said. "What matters is what he can prove in court. And unfortunately, your disappearance from your own wedding supports his narrative perfectly." I sank onto the piano bench, overwhelmed. "So what happens now?" "Now you have a choice to make," Alexander said, moving closer. "You can try to fight this in court, where Daniel has already started building his case and you have no legal representation. Or you can let me handle it." "Handle it how?" Alexander's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. "By eliminating the problem permanently." "You mean kill him?" "I mean make him disappear." Alexander's voice was matter of fact, as if we were discussing dinner plans. "Permanently and completely, so he can never threaten you again." The casual way he said it should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself considering the option with a detachment that surprised me. Daniel had been planning to murder me for money. Now he was trying to steal that money through legal manipulation. Why shouldn't he face the consequences of his choices? "There's another option," Marco said quietly, "one that might serve everyone's interests." Alexander turned to his uncle, eyebrows raised. "I'm listening." "Marriage." The word hung in the air like a bomb. I stared at Marco, certain I'd misheard. "Explain," Alexander said, his voice carefully neutral. "If Miss Reynolds were to marry someone else, someone with the resources and legal standing to challenge Daniel's petition, his conservatorship claim would become meaningless." Marco's eyes moved between Alexander and me. "A husband has prior claim over any other proposed guardian." "You're suggesting I marry Alexander," I said slowly. "I'm suggesting you consider all your options." Marco's tone was diplomatic. A marriage would provide immediate legal protection, access to the Romano family's legal resources, and make any future attempts at manipulation much more difficult. Alexander moved to the window, staring out at his domain with the same predatory focus I'd seen the night before. It would also make the protection arrangement permanent. And binding, I added, understanding the implications. There would be no going back. There's already no going back, Alexander said, turning to face me. Daniel has made sure of that. The only question is whether you want to fight this battle from a position of strength or weakness. I looked around the music room, at the piano that had been prepared specifically for me, at the luxury that surrounded me like armor against the world. Then I thought about my tiny apartment, my minimum wage job, the constant fear of men who looked at me like a paycheck waiting to be claimed. What would this marriage look like? I asked. Practically speaking. Like any marriage, Alexander said. You'd be my wife in every sense of the word. You'd live here, bear my name, share my life. And my inheritance? Would remain yours, protected by prenuptial agreements that ensure Daniel can never touch it. Alexander moved closer, his dark eyes intense. But you'd have access to resources that make your inheritance look like pocket change. In exchange for what? Alexander's smile was sharp and dangerous. In exchange for belonging to me, completely and permanently. The possessive way he said it sent heat spiraling through me, a dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the way he looked at me. Like I was something precious and rare and worth keeping. I need time to think, I said, though even as I spoke, I could feel my resolve weakening. Time is something we don't have much of, Marco interjected. The conservatorship hearing is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. If we're going to contest it, we need to act quickly. How quickly? Today, Alexander said. We can be married this afternoon, have the paperwork filed before business hours end. By tomorrow's hearing, you'll be Mrs. Romano, with all the legal protections that provides. The speed of it made my head spin. This afternoon? I have a judge who owes me favors, Alexander said. He can perform the ceremony here in private. No publicity, no spectacle. Just a legal proceeding that protects your interests. I stood from the piano bench, needing to pace, to move, to do something with the nervous energy coursing through me. And if I refuse? If I decide to fight Daniel in court on my own? Alexander and Marco exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Then you'll face him without resources, without legal representation, and without protection, Alexander said finally. And when he wins, which he will, you'll have nothing and no one to keep you safe. But I'll be free. You'll be alone, Alexander corrected. There's a difference. I moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where discreet security forces maintained their careful watch. Freedom versus safety. Independence versus protection. It should have been an easy choice. But as I stood there, surrounded by luxury I'd never dreamed of, with a man who looked at me like I mattered offering me everything I'd ever wanted, I realized that freedom was a luxury I could no longer afford. If I agree, I said slowly, if I marry you, what guarantees do I have that you won't become just another Daniel? Another man trying to control me for my money? Alexander moved to stand behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, smell that intoxicating scent of sandalwood and spice. You have my word. The word of a Mafia boss. The word of a man who's never broken a promise to someone under his protection. Alexander's voice was soft but filled with steel. I'm not Daniel, Ava. I don't need your money. And I don't make promises I can't keep. I turned to face him, studying those dark eyes for any hint of deception. All I saw was certainty, power, and something that might have been genuine caring. What do you get out of this? I asked. Really? Alexander's smile was slow and predatory. I get you. The simple honesty of it took my breath away. Not my money, not my connections, not what I could do for him. Just me. When was the last time someone had wanted me for myself? Mrs. Chen, Alexander said without taking his eyes off me. Please call Judge Morrison. Tell him we'll need his services this afternoon. Wait, I said, panic fluttering in my chest. I haven't agreed to anything. Haven't you? Alexander's hand cupped my cheek, his thumb tracing along my jawline. You're here, in my house, wearing clothes I provided, playing a piano I had tuned for you. You've already made your choice, Ava. You just need to admit it to yourself. He was right, and we both knew it. From the moment I'd gotten into his car, from the moment I'd let him bring me here, I'd been moving toward this decision. The marriage was just making it official. One condition, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Name it. I want to see Daniel's face when he finds out. I want him to know that his plan didn't just fail. It backfired completely. Alexander's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. That can be arranged. 3 hours later, I stood in Alexander's private study, wearing a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen had somehow procured in my exact size. Judge Morrison, a nervous man in his 60s, who kept glancing at Alexander with barely concealed anxiety, had performed the ceremony with efficient professionalism. The rings Alexander had provided were simple platinum bands, elegant and expensive, but not ostentatious. As he slipped mine onto my finger, I caught the slight tremor in his hands, the first sign of anything other than perfect control I'd seen from him. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, Judge Morrison intoned, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Alexander's kiss was gentle, almost reverent, nothing like the possessive claiming I'd expected. When he pulled back, his dark eyes were intense with something I couldn't quite name. Mrs. Romano, he said softly, testing how my new name sounded. Mr. Romano, I replied, surprised by how natural it felt. As Judge Morrison gathered his papers and made hasty excuses to leave, I found myself staring at the ring on my finger. In the space of 24 hours, I'd gone from almost bride to widow-in-waiting to Mafia wife. Any regrets? Alexander asked, following my gaze to the platinum band. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret marrying a dangerous man I barely knew? Did I regret trading my independence for protection? Did I regret choosing safety over freedom? Ask me again in a year, I said finally. Alexander's laugh was low and rough. Fair enough. Marco appeared in the doorway, holding a manila folder. The paperwork has been filed. As of 30 minutes ago, Mrs. Romano is legally protected from any conservatorship proceedings. And Daniel? Received word of the marriage an hour ago. Marco's smile was sharp. He's currently in his lawyer's office, screaming about fraudulent marriages and demanding investigations. Let him scream, Alexander said. He has no legal standing anymore. I moved to the window, looking out at the world beyond Alexander's walls. Somewhere out there, Daniel was discovering that his carefully laid plans had crumbled completely. The woman he'd planned to murder for money had just married into one of the most powerful crime families in New York. The irony was almost too perfect. What happens now? I asked. Alexander moved to stand behind me, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. Now you learn what it means to be a Romano, what it means to have the kind of protection that comes with real power, and what it means to belong to you. And what it means to belong to me, he agreed, his voice soft but filled with promise. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the gardens, I felt the last of my old life slip away. Ava Reynolds was gone, buried under layers of silk and security, and the platinum band that marked me as Alexander Romano's wife. In her place stood someone new, someone protected, someone valued, someone who was about to discover exactly what she'd gotten herself into. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it sent anticipation coursing through my veins like fire. The first sign that my new life came with complications I hadn't anticipated arrived 3 days after the wedding, in the form of a woman who looked like she'd stepped off the cover of Vogue. I was in the music room, working through a particularly challenging Chopin piece, when Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her usual composed expression tight with something that might have been worry. "Mrs. Romano," she said, the title still feeling foreign on both our tongues. "You have a visitor." Before I could ask who, the woman swept past Mrs. Chen with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. She was tall and willowy, with platinum blonde hair styled in a perfect chignon and wearing a black Chanel suit that probably cost more than my old car. But it was her eyes that caught my attention, pale blue and cold as Arctic ice. "So, you're the little mouse Alexander married." Her voice carried a slight accent, European but refined. How disappointing. I stood from the piano bench, every instinct telling me I was facing a predator. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" "Victoria Blackwood." She said the name like it should mean something to me. "Alexander's fiancée, or rather, his former fiancée, thanks to your rather dramatic entrance into his life." The blood drained from my face. "His fiancée?" Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. Did he not mention me? How like him to omit inconvenient details. She moved into the room with predatory grace, examining the piano, the artwork, the luxury that surrounded us. "We've been engaged for 2 years. The wedding was planned for next month." I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. Alexander had been engaged? To this ice queen who was looking at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe? "I think there's been some misunderstanding," I managed. "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding, all right." Victoria turned to face me fully, and I saw the fury burning beneath her composed exterior, but not the kind you think. She moved closer, invading my personal space with deliberate intent. "You see, little mouse, Alexander and I have an arrangement. Our families have been planning this alliance for years. My father controls shipping along the eastern seaboard. Alexander controls the ports. Together, we would have been unstoppable." Would have been? Would have been, yes. Because you've complicated things considerably. Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. But complications can be resolved. The threat was clear, and I felt ice settling in my stomach. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality." Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the gardens with the same proprietary air I'd seen Alexander display. "Alexander may have married you to solve some temporary problem, but marriages can be annulled. Wives can. Disappear." The casual way she said it made my skin crawl. Alexander would never what? Hurt someone who was no longer useful to him? Victoria's laugh was like broken glass. "You really are naive, aren't you?" Before I could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the room like a whip. "Victoria." I spun to find him standing in the doorway, his face set in lines of cold fury. He was dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his powerful frame, but it was his eyes that made me take an involuntary step backward. I'd seen Alexander angry before, but this was something else entirely. This was the look of a man who was considering murder. "Alexander, darling." Victoria's tone shifted immediately, becoming warm and intimate. "I was just getting acquainted with your new wife." "You were just leaving." Alexander moved into the room, and I could feel the temperature drop several degrees. "Now." "We need to talk," Victoria said, her composure never wavering. "About the Blackwood contracts, about the shipping arrangements, about what this marriage means for our family's alliance." "What it means," Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet, "is that our engagement is over, permanently." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly and desperate beneath the polished surface. "You can't be serious. You'd throw away everything we've built for some little nobody?" "That nobody is my wife." Alexander moved to stand beside me, his hand coming to rest on the small of my back. The contact was warm and reassuring, but I could feel the tension coiled in his muscles. "And if you ever speak about her that way again, you'll discover exactly how seriously I take threats to my family." "Your family?" Victoria's voice was bitter with disbelief. "You've known her for what, a week? I've been part of your life for years." "You've been part of a business arrangement," Alexander corrected. "One that no longer serves my interests." The finality in his voice seemed to hit Victoria like a physical blow. For a moment, her composed facade cracked completely, revealing the fury and desperation beneath. Then she pulled herself together, smoothing her already perfect hair and adjusting her jacket. "This isn't over," she said, her voice returning to that Arctic calm. "The Blackwood family doesn't accept changes in agreements lightly." "The Blackwood family will accept whatever I decide," Alexander replied, "unless they'd prefer to find new shipping routes." Victoria's eyes flashed with something dangerous, but she simply smiled and moved toward the door. "Enjoy your honeymoon, little mouse," she said to me as she passed. "I hope it lasts longer than most of Alexander's interests." After she left, the room felt larger somehow, as if her presence had been sucking all the air from the space. I sank back onto the piano bench, my legs suddenly unsteady. "You were engaged," I said quietly. Alexander moved to the bar cart in the corner, pouring himself a scotch with movements that were just a little too controlled. "I was contracted to be married. There's a difference." "Is there?" I watched him down the scotch in one swallow. "Because she seemed to think you loved her. Victoria thinks a lot of things. Most of them are wrong." Alexander poured another scotch, then moved to sit beside me on the piano bench. "The engagement was a business arrangement, nothing more. But you were planning to go through with it." "I was planning to honor my family's commitments, until something more important came along. Me." The word came out flat, disbelieving. Alexander turned to face me, his dark eyes intense. "You. Because I needed protecting. Because I wanted you." His hand cupped my cheek, thumb tracing along my jawline. "The protection was just the excuse I used to keep you. The honesty of it should have been romantic. Instead, it sent a chill through me." "What does that mean for the Blackwood alliance?" Alexander's smile was sharp and dangerous. "It means Victoria's father will need to find new ways to move his product through my ports. And if he refuses, then he'll find out why people don't refuse me." Alexander stood, moving back to the window. "Don't worry about Victoria, Ava. She's more bark than bite." But I was worried. Not just about Victoria, but about what her visit had revealed. I'd married a man I barely knew, trading one set of complications for another. And now I was beginning to understand that Alexander's world came with enemies I couldn't even imagine. "How many other business arrangements am I disrupting?" I asked. "Several." Alexander's tone was matter-of-fact. "My marriage was part of a larger strategy to consolidate power along the eastern seaboard. Your arrival has forced me to reconsider those plans." "Forced you?" Alexander turned back to me, and something in his expression made my pulse quicken. "You think I had a choice? You think I could have let you walk away? You could have paid Daniel's debt and sent me on my way." "I could have." Alexander moved closer, his presence filling the space between us, "but then some other man would have seen you as an opportunity. Some other Daniel would have tried to use you for your money. So you decided to use me instead. I decided to keep you." Alexander's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper. "To make sure no one else could ever hurt you again. By making me yours. By making you mine," he agreed, his hand sliding into my hair, completely and permanently. The possessive way he said it sent heat spiraling through me, even as my rational mind screamed warnings. "And what happens when you get tired of me? When the novelty wears off?" Alexander's smile was predatory. "Ask me again in 50 years. Before I could respond, his mouth was on mine, the kiss demanding and possessive and completely overwhelming. I could taste the scotch on his lips, feel the controlled power in the way he held me. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his forehead resting against mine. "More secrets? More complications." Alexander's expression grew serious. "Daniel isn't giving up. According to my sources, he's been reaching out to federal investigators, claiming you were kidnapped and coerced into marriage." My stomach dropped. "The FBI? Not yet, but he's building a case, trying to find someone who'll listen." Alexander's hands moved to my shoulders, steadying me. "He's also been in contact with some of my competitors, offering information in exchange for help locating you." "What kind of information?" "Details about my operations, security protocols, financial arrangements." Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. "He's trying to start a war, Ava, and you're the prize he's fighting for." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "So I've made you vulnerable." "You've made yourself a target," Alexander corrected. "But that's nothing new. You've been a target since the day you inherited that money. But now your enemies know about me. Now my enemies know you're under my protection." Alexander's smile was cold and sharp, "which makes touching you a declaration of war." I stood from the piano bench, needing to pace, to move, to do something with the nervous energy coursing through me. "How do we stop him?" "We don't stop him. We eliminate him." Alexander's tone was matter-of-fact. "Permanently." "You mean kill him?" "I mean remove the threat before it destroys everything I've built." Alexander moved to intercept my pacing, catching my hands in his. "Daniel Cole has become a liability that can't be allowed to continue breathing." The casual way he discussed murder should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself considering the logic of it. Daniel had tried to kill me for money. Now he was trying to destroy the man who'd protected me. Why should he be allowed to continue threatening everything I'd found here? "When?" I asked. Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're not going to argue? Not going to try to convince me there's another way? Is there?" "No." "Then when?" Alexander's smile was genuinely warm this time, tinged with something that might have been pride. "Tonight. Daniel has a standing poker game every Thursday at a private club in Midtown. He'll be there until late, probably drunk. Definitely alone when he leaves. And then Mrs. Romano becomes a widow before she's even settled into being a wife." Alexander's hands tightened on mine. "Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Daniel's cold calculation as he planned my murder. About Sarah's betrayal. About Victoria's threats and the federal investigators and all the enemies circling like sharks scenting blood in the water. "I'm prepared for whatever keeps us safe," I said finally. Alexander's kiss was gentle this time, almost reverent. "Then welcome to my world, Mrs. Romano. Welcome to what it really means to be under my protection." As evening fell over Manhattan, I stood at the window of my beautiful prison and watched Alexander's men preparing for war. Cars came and went in the circular drive. Men in expensive suits spoke in hushed tones on secure phones. Weapons were checked and rechecked with professional efficiency. By tomorrow morning, Daniel Cole would be dead, and the last threat to my new life would be eliminated. The thought should have filled me with horror. Instead, it felt like justice. I was no longer the naive young woman who'd fled into a storm to escape a murderous fiancé. I was Mrs. Alexander Romano, wife of one of the most powerful men in New York, protected by an army of loyal soldiers who would kill or die at his command. And for the first time since my parents had cut me off 3 years ago, I felt truly safe. The price of that safety was blood. But as I watched Alexander coordinate his war from the comfort of his study, I found I was willing to pay it. Some prices were worth paying for love, and despite everything, the danger, the violence, the complications, I was only beginning to understand. I was falling in love with the dark angel who'd saved me from hell, even if his salvation came with wings as black as midnight. I woke to the sound of Alexander's phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. The clock read 3:47 a.m., and through the darkness, I could see him reaching for the device with the kind of immediate alertness that told me this wasn't unexpected. "Romano," he answered, his voice instantly sharp and focused despite having been asleep moments before. I couldn't make out the words from the other end, but the tone was urgent, clipped with professional efficiency. Alexander sat up, running his free hand through his dark hair as he listened. "Good. Clean it up and make sure there's nothing that leads back to us." His voice was cold, businesslike. "What about the security footage?" More conversation I couldn't follow, but I didn't need to hear the details to understand what had happened. The tension that had been coiled in my chest for hours finally released, leaving me feeling strangely empty. "No complications," Alexander continued. "It needs to look exactly like what it was. A robbery gone wrong in the wrong part of town." A pause. "Yes, I'm sure. Make sure his wallet and watch are missing. Random violence, nothing more." He ended the call and set the phone back on the nightstand, but he didn't lie back down. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders tense in the moonlight streaming through the windows. "It's done?" I asked quietly. "It's done." Alexander turned to look at me, his dark eyes unreadable in the shadows. Daniel Cole was found dead in an alley 6 blocks from his poker game. Single gunshot, robbery gone wrong. The police won't look too hard at it. I waited for guilt to hit me, for horror at what we'd done, for some kind of emotional response to the news that the man I'd once loved was dead. Instead, I felt only a strange sense of closure, like a chapter finally ending. "How do you feel?" Alexander asked, studying my face in the dim light. "Safe," I answered honestly. "For the first time in weeks, I feel completely safe." Alexander's smile was soft, tinged with something that might have been relief. "Good. That's how you should feel." He moved back under the covers, pulling me against his chest with gentle but possessive hands. I settled into his warmth, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. This was only the second night we'd shared a bed. Our marriage might have been born of necessity, but the physical intimacy was still new, still charged with uncertainty and promise. "What happens now?" I asked, my fingers tracing patterns on his chest through the soft cotton of his t-shirt. "Now you learn what it really means to be part of this family." Alexander's voice was quiet but filled with steel. "Daniel was just the beginning, Ava. There will always be threats. Always be people who want to take what's mine. People like Victoria? People like Victoria." His arm tightened around me. "She won't give up easily. The Blackwood Alliance was worth too much to her family's operations." "So what do we do about her?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and I could feel him thinking, planning, calculating risks and benefits with the same cold precision he brought to everything else. "We show strength," he said finally. "Tomorrow night there's a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. Half the city's power brokers will be there, including Victoria and her father. We're going to make our first public appearance as husband and wife. The thought of facing Victoria again, of stepping into Alexander's world as his wife rather than his protected asset, sent nerves skittering through my stomach. Is that wise? So soon after. It's necessary. In my world, perception is reality. If we appear weak or hesitant, it invites challenges. But if we present a united front, if we show that our marriage is real and permanent, it sends a message that can't be misunderstood. What message? Alexander's smile was sharp in the darkness. That Mrs. Romano is under my protection, and anyone who threatens her will face the full weight of my family's resources. I thought about that as dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere in the city, police were processing a crime scene, cataloging evidence that would lead nowhere, filing reports that would quickly be buried under more pressing cases. Daniel Cole's death would be a footnote, a statistic, a cautionary tale about the dangers of walking alone at night in the wrong neighborhood. No one would ever know the truth except the people in this house. Mrs. Chen brought breakfast to our room, along with several newspapers and a tablet loaded with news websites. The story was already breaking. Prominent Manhattan businessman found dead. Police investigate apparent robbery. The photos they used were from Daniel's corporate headshots, showing him smiling and confident and very much alive. Any regrets? Alexander asked, watching me read the coverage with clinical detachment. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret that Daniel was dead? Did I mourn the man who'd planned to murder me for money? Did I feel guilty for the role I'd played in his elimination? No, I said finally, setting the tablet aside. He made his choice when he decided I was worth more dead than alive. This is just consequences. Alexander's approval was warm and immediate. That's exactly how you need to think about it. In this world, everyone makes choices. Daniel chose to threaten what belongs to me. The consequences were always going to be fatal. The possessive way he said, "What belongs to me," should have bothered me. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my belly, a dangerous warmth that had everything to do with the way Alexander looked at me and nothing to do with fear. "Tell me about tonight," I said, changing the subject before I did something reckless like kiss him senseless. "What should I expect?" "Expect to be on display," Alexander said bluntly. "Everyone will be watching, evaluating, looking for weaknesses they can exploit. Victoria will try to make you look foolish or out of place. Her father will be taking your measure, deciding whether you're an asset or a liability. And what am I?" Alexander's smile was predatory. "You're my wife. That makes you the most dangerous woman in the room." The rest of the day passed in preparation. Mrs. Chen produced a gown that had been tailored specifically for me, midnight blue silk that hugged my curves before flowing into an elegant train. The neckline was modest but sophisticated, and the color made my skin look luminous. Jewelry appeared from Alexander's personal collection. A necklace of sapphires and diamonds that probably cost more than most people's houses, matching earrings, and a bracelet that caught the light with every movement. "You look like a queen," Alexander said when I emerged from the dressing room. He was devastating in his black tuxedo, every inch the powerful man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. "I feel like I'm wearing a costume," I admitted, touching the sapphire necklace nervously. "Good, because that's exactly what this is, a performance." Alexander moved closer, adjusting the necklace with gentle fingers. "Tonight, you're not Ava Reynolds, the struggling pianist who served coffee to pay rent. You're Mrs. Alexander Romano, wife of one of the most powerful men in New York. Act like it." The limousine ride to the museum was a study in controlled tension. Alexander spent most of the journey on his phone, speaking in rapid Italian to various members of his organization. I caught enough to understand that security arrangements were being finalized, that potential threats were being assessed, that my first public appearance as his wife was being treated like a military operation. "Remember," he said, as we pulled up to the museum's entrance, where photographers were already gathered behind velvet ropes. "We're deeply in love and completely united. Whatever happens tonight, whatever Victoria or her father might say, we present a united front. And if someone asks about our whirlwind romance," Alexander's smile was sharp as a blade, "tell them it was love at first sight, that you'd never felt anything like what you feel for me, that you knew immediately I was the man you wanted to spend your life with." The irony wasn't lost on me. In a strange way, all of that was true. The museum had been transformed for the evening, its usually austere galleries filled with soft lighting and elegant floral arrangements. The city's elite circulated among priceless artifacts, their conversations a careful dance of social positioning and business negotiation. I spotted several faces I recognized from society pages, along with others whose photographs I'd seen in very different contexts. Men whose legitimate businesses were fronts for darker enterprises, women whose charity work was funded by blood money. Mrs. Romano. The voice was smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. I turned to find a man in his 60s approaching, distinguished and elegant, but with eyes like a shark's. "Vincent Blackwood. I believe you've met my daughter." Victoria appeared at his side like a beautiful viper, dressed in white that should have made her look angelic, but somehow managed to suggest something more predatory. "Father, this is Alexander's little bride. The one who's caused so much disruption to our family arrangements," Vincent continued, his smile never wavering even as his words carried clear menace. Alexander moved closer to me, his hand settling possessively on the small of my back. "Vincent, Victoria, I trust you're enjoying the evening?" "Oh, immensely," Victoria purred. "Though I must say, your wife looks a bit overwhelmed by all this. Perhaps she's not quite ready for the demands of your world. Perhaps you're not quite ready to accept that your engagement is over," I replied, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "Permanently." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury beneath. "How refreshing. The little mouse has claws." "The little mouse has protection," Alexander said quietly, his voice carrying just enough edge to make Vincent's eyes sharpen with interest. "The kind of protection that extends to dealing with any threats to her well-being." "Are you threatening my daughter?" Vincent asked, his tone deceptively mild. "I'm explaining reality," Alexander replied. "Your shipping contracts are up for renewal next month. I'd hate for personal feelings to interfere with business decisions." The threat was delivered with surgical precision, subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, but clear enough that Vincent couldn't mistake the message. "Cross my wife, and your entire operation suffers." "Of course," Vincent said smoothly. "Business should always remain separate from personal matters." But I caught the look that passed between Victoria and her father, saw the cold calculation in their eyes. This wasn't over. If anything, I just made myself a bigger target. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Alexander guided me through the social minefield with expert precision, introducing me to allies and identifying enemies with subtle gestures and coded language. I began to understand that every interaction was layered with meaning, every conversation a potential negotiation or declaration of war. "You did well," Alexander said as we finally escaped to the limousine. "Vincent knows he can't move against you without consequences. Victoria knows her engagement is truly over, and everyone else knows that Mrs. Romano is under my protection. But they also know I'm your weakness," I said, voicing the fear that had been growing all evening. "They know that threatening me is the best way to hurt you." Alexander's smile was cold and dangerous. "Let them try. They'll discover exactly how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine." The possessive certainty in his voice should have worried me. Instead, it sent heat spiraling through my body. A dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way he looked at me. Like I was precious. Like I was worth protecting. Like I was worth killing for. When we arrived home, Alexander's hands were on me before we'd even made it through the front door. The careful control he'd maintained all evening finally snapped, and suddenly, I was pressed against the marble wall of the foyer, his mouth hot and demanding against mine. Mine, he growled against my lips, his hands tangling in my carefully styled hair. You're mine, Ava, completely and permanently. Yes, I breathed, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Yes, I'm yours. Later, as we lay tangled in silk sheets with moonlight streaming through the windows, I traced patterns on Alexander's chest and tried to process everything that had changed in my life. A week ago, I'd been a struggling pianist in love with a man who planned to murder me. Now I was the wife of a Mafia boss, protected by an army of soldiers and wearing sapphires worth more than my old apartment. A week ago, I'd been alone and vulnerable and afraid. Now I was Mrs. Romano, and that name carried weight and power and the promise of protection that would never falter. What are you thinking about? Alexander asked, his fingers combing through my hair with gentle possessiveness. Everything, I said honestly. How much has changed? How different I feel. Different how? I considered the question, trying to find words for the transformation I could feel happening inside me. Stronger, more confident, like I finally know who I'm supposed to be. And who is that? I lifted my head to look at him, meeting those dark eyes that had become my anchor in a world turned upside down. Yours. I'm supposed to be yours. Alexander's smile was soft and genuine, free of the sharp edges that characterized most of his expressions. Then we're exactly where we're supposed to be. As dawn broke over Manhattan once again, I settled into Alexander's arms and let myself believe it was true. Daniel was dead, Victoria had been warned off, and I was protected by a power that could keep me safe from any threat. The price had been my freedom, my independence, my old life. But as Alexander's breathing deepened into sleep beside me, I knew I'd made the right choice. Some cages were lined with silk and gold, and the promise of love that would burn as dark and dangerous as the man offering it. And some prisoners found that captivity was just another word for home. I closed my eyes and let myself dream of a future where danger was just another word for the life I'd chosen. Where protection came wrapped in possessive hands and whispered promises. Where love was as sharp and beautiful as the blade that defended it. Mrs. Romano had everything she'd ever wanted, and she was never going to let it go.